welcome to Beets, Beds, and Browns. We couldn't be more excited today to be here with Nikky Witkowski, Extension Coordinator of Ag and Natural Resources with the Purdue Master Gardener Extension. Welcome, Nikky, and thanks for sharing your time with us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me out today.
As you know, we cover emerging hip-hop artists from the Northwest Indiana and Chicagoland area, gardening in all its forms, from commercial agriculture to homestead gardening, and then brown spirits, including bourbon and whiskey. So today you're going to cover the beds portion with us, and we're going to talk all things gardening, and not only how someone who's a complete green entrant into the gardening field can get involved and get information, and then what the extension does and how they share that.
Sounds like a plan.
All
Let's
right.
rock.
So first off, how long have you been involved with the Master Gardener?
So I have actually been involved, this is not May 6th yet, but May 6th is my 15 years being involved in Extension. I actually started in Lake County in 2007 and moved to Porter County in 2018. Basically same position. I did shift a little from Lakes more consumer horticulture. Porter has a little bit more balanced than obviously Lake does with a higher population.
And with the commercial side, we're talking about 100-acre commercial ag development, corn, soy, primarily?
Yeah, that is the biggest portion of it, but there are a decent amount of people who do have the livestock out there, as well as we do have a lot of veggies being grown in the area as well. So we do have some commercials, but we also do have a lot of, this is a shift I have seen since I started an extension, a lot more urban, or you might call them urban fringe, who are actually, just outside or just inside city limits that are more small scale farmers. So I do work with those as well.
Nice.
And I do mean farmers in the sense of growing produce, potentially even for markets.
Okay. And we interviewed State Senator Earl Harris about the urban agriculture bill last year and how they're taking underdeveloped areas and urban communities and providing tax benefits and resources and able to maximize the development of those into ag interests.
Yes.
When we talk about livestock, that's chickens, pigs, cows. I'm sure there's some llamas and alpacas in there, some goats.
Yep.
Anything else that we're missing?
Those are the biggest ones, but realize too that there is people who want duck and duck eggs.
Okay.
So we do see that, as well as a lot of people want to raise their own turkeys sometimes. So you will see that production in Indiana, and especially in our area as well. You will see the people who might want those backyard flocks as well. I think I've heard a little more about ducks as of late as just another upcomer.
We were watching some content on permaculture a couple days ago, and I actually saw someone that had a rainforest greenhouse with quail in it. And so then we dug into that and realized the quail are like the Tic Tacs of the fowl eggs. So.
Yep. Yeah, they. I'm pretty sure you can get quails and guineas, and some of those are also, you say Tic Tac, I think ticks. And some of those are actually really good tick eaters. And so that's why those are sometimes coming up in the world too.
Okay, yeah, we hear that about chickens as well. And we saw a Little Big Farm where the snail issue was resolved by the ducks being let loose on the property. So when a pest presents itself, there's a predator there to take care of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of that natural selection that goes on that, when you bring out some of these things, yes, you can have that as long as your animal population doesn't start to overwhelm your area and they eat down your crops too.
Understandable. So drilling it down from, again, the commercial ag, the commercial livestock, to the homestead gardener, potentially even the patio gardener, what are some things that someone just looking to begin their garden journey would be involved in?
The one thing I always encourage people is start small. Over the years, I've heard too many people, I put in this many apple trees, or I put in this many plants. And then what I always hear is you become so overwhelmed so fast. So my strongest encouragement is start small, because we don't always think about, plants and how much attention they need, especially when it comes to vegetables. On the way here, I was thinking about, how am I going to get my tomato plants? But the biggest concern of that is also, am I going to have to worry about some late season frost and freezes? We're still obviously not out of those woods. I'm looking forward to next week and the higher temperatures, but we're still not out of the woods on that until usually about after Mother's Day, or I will plant sometimes as late as the end of May just to make sure. But I might take a risk this year and go a little bit earlier. But that's the first problem is that people get them out too early and get too many in, and they don't look at how productive that plant is. Yeah. So I really caution people, start small and have a plan for bigger. You know, again, like an apple tree, I hear people, oh, I want this apple, this apple, this apple, this apple. But then they forget that one apple tree can easily sustain a single household with apples. It's just you get them at one time. Yeah. And they go and buy 5 and 6 and then realize, I've got a small orchard, what do I do with all these apples? So start small so that you know you can build into it. And research. Purdue has publications where we do estimate how much harvest you will actually get from you can boil it down to a single tomato plant or single apple tree. So do your research. How much do you need? And realize some of these plants, like tomatoes, you can pick and choose some of your tomatoes, but it's either going to be you're going to get it all at once or you might get some dribblings, but you have to realize when they're ready, you've got to be too.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, we still have about 20-gallon bags of tomatoes in our freezer that, is obviously a storage and inventory concern, let alone the work that it takes to do that, which is a full day or afternoon and a half. When we moved into the area that we're in now, we had 2 apple trees, a pear tree, and 2 grapevines. And starting small would have been nice, but we got all of those pest problems, all of those pruning issues, bacteria, fungus that you're dealing with all those plants on top of trying to launch a garden. So it would have been a nice transition to be able to build up instead of maintain all that work.
And that's a good point too. You know, when you start with some plants, you don't know what you have going on. So I always encourage, if you just moved in, like you said, to a location, see what you got first and go from there. Because when it especially comes to like apples or, I'm going to say even tomatoes, there are certain diseases and insects that just love them to death. Oh, yeah. And then that becomes a problem because then you have to figure out how to maintain them. Whereas if you figure out what they have and then figure out, do you want to maintain them, you might be able to remove a problem, potentially that whole plant, but then find one that is resistant to that problem instead.
Like a different strain or a different
variety.
Plant. Yeah. And do you recommend planting an entire tree or grafting onto an existing tree? Or
grafting is really a science. If you don't have the right tools and the right information, I would recommend just buy the tree. Okay. And because the other side of it is too, how are you getting the rootstock? Different rootstocks have different compatibilities and different properties to them actually. Some rootstocks will allow you to have that dwarf versus a semi-dwarf, which will shorten the height. But again, they do studies on these to make sure which ones are the most compatible and not. Okay. So sometimes it's just easier. I have actually taught grafting classes. Nice. And it's something that maybe in 2023 I will actually do again, is an apple grafting, because I haven't done it partially due to COVID and partially because it always scares me to have to bring out that first aid kit. Just in case, because it seems like if I bring it out, at least then nobody will cut themselves.
Fair enough, yeah.
But it is a science. I love it, but it is a science, and I don't hear of greater than 50% success your first tries.
Okay.
So that's why I say if you want your tree, it's best to probably buy it.
Nice.
And that doesn't have to be from like the box stores. You can look anywhere for the apple tree. And sometimes you do have to go mail order for the best varieties. Yeah.
And talking about a grafting class, one of the things I learned how to do was canning. And I took a class and, it was a little intimidating. I was the only gentleman there at the time. And, now we can all of our excess vegetables and it's just kind of old hat that we do that. So definitely when you're approaching something, YouTube didn't exist 100 years ago. That was the really formation for the extension, and to be able to provide a resource for people, it's still valuable today, and there's still live in-person education. Would you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
so we do have different educators. So I personally don't teach the canning classes, but I can speak from the fact that I used to, so when I worked in Lake County, I had that educator give me tips and tricks on how to can, because I wasn't able to ever, at that time, take her full class. But she was able to give me the advice I needed and turn me on to some good recipes. And I also point this out because things have changed in the canning world of food safety, and even how they even just maybe even make the lids differently. Yeah. And so she helped to try to dispel some of the past myths of, like, for example, she always taught me, don't leave the canning rings on. It's not needed. So as soon as mine are canning done, I take the canning ring off, and sometimes that saved my butt a few times because I found out it didn't seal. by taking the ring off. I
Yeah.
found out it didn't seal right. So then I was able to refrigerate it and or freeze it instead as a safety precaution because it didn't can right. So I probably saved myself a few times. But yeah, we do periodically offer those kinds of classes. Lake County has done them where they're in person and you get to can on the spot. But other educators may do like, hey, here's all the information and the things that you need during a class. It's just not every county has the space to be able to actually do the full-on cooking and hands-on.
Sure. Yeah. Renting kitchen space is often a challenge.
Yes.
How has the organization changed post-COVID? Have you taken more content online? Have you gotten away from in-person? Do you look to get back?
Yeah, so it is, I think, ever evolving. COVID taught us, and I think it's a little of what we kind of knew, that we can do virtual programs because I even personally would host some statewide live virtual programs where people could watch them from home. We were doing a little of that pre-COVID. During COVID, yes, it forced us all online, or I sometimes did prepared programs on a flash drive. But even during COVID, we learned that it's almost better just to put it pure virtual, and we found better ways to store and share the info. Where I see us going is many people have learned to adapt to that virtual world. There is still the massive desire to get back in person. I'm actually planning an in-person Master Gardener class because of that fact that people want to get back in person. Yep. So I am planning a Master Gardener class that will be in person starting May 24th that we do have applications out for.
Okay.
Because again, there was that desire that I'm ready. Not everybody is, but I'm ready. I want to get back.
Nice.
But we are still offering purely virtual programs because sometimes what we learn too is that I work with commercial turf and horticulture industry. They don't want to drive to Purdue or Indianapolis and kill a whole day when they can sit at their office, and we now have better ways and processes to assist them virtually from there so that way they can come to our 2-hour program, do what they need to do, and then go back to work.
It really is so easy, and it's a convenience factor for all number of constituencies, whether it's garden class or garden students, religion, and different masses have gone online, and we use online for our marketing business. So it's nonstop, and literally the flick of a switch and you can be live and sharing content. So,
yes, you can.
So did you say the demand is about 50-50 for that, or?
It's getting there, I'm going to say. I don't think we're completely 50-50 yet. And I think it's varying across the state greatly because there's been portions of the state that I've worked in that, heck, just 2 weeks ago, I was in Elkhart County and we had 16 people coming to a program where we were talking about drones and UAVs and how to get certified to become an official UAV pilot under the Part 107 exemption. We had 16 there. But yet we offered the same program in Jasper County a month prior, barely got 7 registrants. Part of that was demand, and part of that I think was I'm still feeling this out. Yeah. So the demand is increasing, but it's increasing at different rates across the counties. And I am going to say all the way down to the counties because it's not even the state. Yeah. Neighboring counties are even varying on how they feel.
Sure. I mean, the difference between we're right on the county line. This is Lake and that's Porter. And the kids drive to school in the Boone Grove school system, and it's cornfields. As far as you can see, there's no gas station. There's no place to stop for something to eat on the way there. And Lake County, obviously, we consider it just a suburb of Chicago.
Yeah, it's pretty urban.
So we talked a little bit about technology, and for those of you who don't know, if you've never been in a combine, they're GPS-driven, wireless radio. They are like a NASA satellite. They are so complex and technically advanced. How does that trickle down into your work? I know you deal with commercial, you deal with the individuals. Where are you seeing tech applied to ag across those obviously wide audiences?
Yeah, so you are right. We are getting, combines that are, and I'm going to say mostly self-driving. And the reason why I say that is because, so what you have to keep in mind is, like you just said, the country is the country. And I have heard many times from farmers that you want to say it's going to be all okay and groovy as they go down the road, but they can lose their GPS signal, and you will literally see little corrections because it's lost signal, or the signal now says I should be over here, not here, because of just the natural way things go. It is hard to be that precise. So they're still not, well, just go send the tractor and go. They still have to be there. Yeah. The key is also, there's only so much we can get, I'll say, technology right now in the industry, because they do have to still go out and do crop scouting. We are developing with the drones ways that they can go fly a drone, and that way they can get a basically overview shot of how does this whole area look right now. But they still have to have it analyzed, and they sometimes can actually spot weeds in there, but not always, or diseases. Diseases sometimes start so low in the canopy that if I'm taking a shot from overhead, I can't see these lower leaves that actually have the disease.
Well, and sometimes that's a visual inspection or optic sensor. Sometimes it's thermal, because they can dictate things, right? So that all these sensors on these drones that are able to diagnose crop
But they
issues.
are still limited by what are we going to take a picture of from up above. Yeah. And if the canopy is really high, and that's how they get, plants aren't stupid. Well, okay, sometimes I think plants are stupid when they trees girdle themselves to death, but plants aren't stupid. They're going to have the most leaf mass where there's the most sun. So again, if that leaf mass is at the top, we can't see through those top leaves to see the bottoms. But yeah, we can spot it at times when it comes up. We can start seeing that. And thermal imagery is not as used in crops yet. I think that is something being studied, because even I have a thermal imager, and I keep running it across an irrigation field, because I can see right now at times where his irrigator is and isn't. So I can see that. But the problem we haven't nailed out is, can I actually see the maybe first signs of stress with the thermal versus, we call it an RGB, red, green, blue, just your standard camera. Can we actually see the first sign of stress from from a thermal camera before the RGBs? When you look at thermal cameras, they're going to cost anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 versus the standard cameras on a drone. I have two different drones right now, and my standard one was about $1,500 with a standard, $3,500 with the thermal. Why spend the $3,500 when I can do just as good of a job with the $15,000?
Right.
But that's where, again, I think studies still need to be seen. Well, but if I've got a good enough thermal, can I see that stress that much earlier to save that much more money?
Well, it's good to hear that those wavy lines aren't from people enjoying their bourbon and whiskey, and that it's actually technology failing them in that instance. When you mention irrigator, again, we don't claim to know it all. We want to make sure that our audiences staying with us and understand. When you say irrigator, are you talking about one of the central spinning sprinklers? Okay.
Yeah, the irrigation pivots that you see. And I say pivots because, yes, most of them are like you think. You put a foot down and you can pivot around in a circle, and that's how they work. Occasionally you run into an irrigation line that will just literally run up and down the field. Mm-hmm. That's usually not as practical for commercial farmers. Yeah. That's more like research plots, because we do that at the Purdue field in Wanata. They have a couple that run up and down the sides of the field, but most of them are a pivot that spins.
And is that just a flood? Or
no,
just those rows are the only place they expect things to grow?
Well, you can have an end gun. So at the end of the pivot, if this is the end of the pivot, you can have an end gun shooting further out, and that will help to water a little further out. And that may be because, for example, well, maybe my field edge hits sooner in one spot, but another spot I could still try to cover a little bit. Not all fields are perfectly square, so they might be able to use the end gun to help in those other areas to give them a little more boost, when the pivot may not be able to make it. I'll say all the way around, because not all pivots also, because of, again, odd-shaped fields. Not all pivots will go in a full circle.
And there's functional, the hose nozzles, et cetera. We always see things that are kind of inhibiting full execution of those pieces.
Yeah, so they have different safeties in them to shut the end guns off, so that way, in theory, you really shouldn't have an end gun shooting across the road. Failures happen, things aren't tweaked just right. We have one near our house, and occasionally the irrigator will hit our house because they put our house so close to the farm edge. Yeah. But again, we know whenever that happens, it's just his technology just kind of had a spaz out moment, but they always can correct it fast. They can get out there and correct it. And
then one other thing you mentioned was the trees girdling themselves to death. Yes. Can you explain that?
So, I don't know that we always know why this happens, But, with the tree's roots, I always say you should see it come down and the tree roots should go radially out from around it. Just like you draw the kid size or the kid's shaped of a sun where you do all those little arrows going away from it. That's how they should go. But occasionally you get either a rogue root or from potentially improper planting from the get-go, because they will spiral around in pots and things, a root will start going in a circle, but then the tree will keep getting wider. And then the problem is, even if that root was spiraled out about, I'll say 4 inches at planting, as soon as that tree grows out 4 inches, that root is still there. It'll hit that root, and then that causes a compression of the stem. And then what people don't always realize is it is not the whole stem that is used to transport specifically the nutrients, or we'll call it maybe the food. The inner part of the stem will transport water and stuff, but the very underlayer under the bark, that's what does the food. So if we are compressing that between the inner water transport and the root, we choke it off. And it's just like putting, a girdle around, a lady in the old days. Yeah. You see that at times.
Spanx in today's modern world, yeah.
Yeah, well, but those people usually don't wear to the point of, cutting off their circulation or the tourniquets for blood. That's exactly what happens. It creates like a tourniquet on that side. And so then that's how they can get girdled to death. And it can start on just one side, and then you'll just see one side of the tree flare up. But I've seen it wrap 100% around it, and then I start trimming those, because even my mom got mad at me because she's like, I think my zombie tree finally bit it, because I could tell her tree was girdled all the way around. And she's like, I think my zombie tree just bit it, because that's what I teased and called it, as a zombie tree, because I knew it was going to die.
Nice.
Because I could tell it was girdled all the way around, and I could tell some of the bark was falling off in the wrong spots. And I'm like, you're a zombie tree. It's going to die in the next 1 to 2 years. Because realize, they do store some food and nutrients in their stem, so they can still leaf out for 1 or maybe 2 years. They do store food in their stem.
One of the reasons that we started this show was just our own passion for nature. We've got a white paper birch, or maybe a silver birch root stump that now is growing a black cherry out of it, because nobody did anything and the birds came and landed.
Did their business.
Yeah, so I was like, no, that's a paper birch. And then it started to grow black cherries, and we're like, let's look up what that is. And it's nature has a way of finding a way, which is always impressive. Talk about some of the more popular programming for beginner gardeners that you guys offer.
So some of the biggest ones are going to be like, the vegetable gardening, especially, sometimes fruit gardening. We will also do sometimes some disease and diagnostics during the school year, because we were talking about school earlier. Yeah. But during the growing season, we will do some things like that of, hey, here's some tips and tricks, or, hey, if you've got trees and stuff like that, here's things to be watching for during the season. And we especially do that if we see an up-and-coming pest for the year. We may release it through radio stations or newspapers, or we may have, some other spots and information we send out. But we typically try to send out that kind of information, like I said, through various media channels. And we do have a lot of, I'll say, more static content, where we do sometimes have, like the YouTube channels, or we do have other programmings that we put out there. And Facebook has been a great way for us to also, at times, give out some of that information, because then we're able to share a link, and then it can direct into it. And we will do it sometimes on our websites as well. Here's some great stuff. We do sometimes have mail serves, though, to send it out as well. But sometimes we also, like we said earlier, this is what we've done in the COVID times. Yeah. But we will do programming at libraries and stuff like that as well. So we will sometimes, get our programs publicized that way. But a lot of that basic stuff, I haven't trialed it again yet this year, but we also have a DIY lawn care series that we've been doing. I'm part of that team that kind of helped to make that program, and hope to hopefully put some information out about it either later this fall, which you might say, why? Well, you still got the end of the season that, we can give you some great tips and tricks on how to close your year out well, because sometimes lawns, what you do in the fall is more important than what you did in the spring.
So if I have an issue and I can't find the answer online, there's no information on YouTube, there's a number I can call, the bat phone, if you will.
Sure, yes, and again, you can call, my office number at Porter County is 219-465-5555. 888-841-3555. That's kind of my bat
Direct
line.
line access, yeah.
Well, yeah, still, I don't have my own private line, but that will still get you information, get you routed to the right location. So yes, that is a way, or you can always feel free to shoot me an email. And I tried to make my email simple, but the problem is that sometimes people misspell my name, and that's the only, but now I've also got a quasi remedy for that. But you can always email me at Nikky@Purdue, like the university, not the chicken, .edu, but my name is Nikky. But I did kind of, I took over the Nikki email, so even if you do that,
it'll still get forwarded.
It'll still get forwarded to me. So
nice.
Nikky@Purdue.edu.
So you have the Garden Time newsletter that's put out quarterly.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Master Gardeners put that out. Yeah.
How do someone subscribe to that to get more information?
So the easiest way is just to watch our extension website, because that's, again, the Master Gardeners do that, so you can watch for updates on there. Or, like, for example, here soon I should have like a moss article, because we've had a lot of people asking already this year about, I've got a lot of moss in my yard, what do I do about it? Yeah. So occasionally I will put out articles on that, or like I said, the Facebook stream that we do. Granted, because Facebook, I can't put tons of information, it may link back, like the article from moss, it'll link back to our website when it's a longer article. But our website is the best. My hopes is, and it's just so hard to get things kind of going sometimes, since like I said, just recently switched counties. Yeah. My hope maybe is to, when I was in Lake County, we did actually a Plants and Pests newsletter. Maybe one of these days I'll get back to releasing a, every couple months newsletter, except sometimes in the winter months, what do you talk about? Well, you can talk about, your indoor plants and preparing for the new year, yeah. But it's not like the growing season.
Well, and this year was the first year that we not only extended our seed saving operation and had acorn squash, carrot, and dill that we're now giving away. Beetsbedsbrowns.com, register for your free seed kit. But we also did the overwintering of the acorn squash, spaghetti squash, all the different things. So we finished the last 2 squash yesterday. So nice. Spaghetti squash. So nice. What happens? Do I put it in sand? Do I not? Is dry cooled enough? And things of that nature. So.
Yeah, as I say, indoor or growing veggies like that is really tough. And I will also point out, because you were talking about that, we actually did confirm up. We are having a vegetable field day at Penny Purdue on August 9th. That will be like a 5 to 8 p.m. program. You may start seeing some save the date on that. And occasionally we do talk about high tunnels. Not necessarily always season-long growing, but we will have some information about high tunnels or cover crops for the wintertime to benefit your gardens. Yeah,
we try and extend. We got a late start this year, but we try and have stuff in the ground by April 15th, and then we are bringing out the parsnips and carrots November 15th. So we try and extend it as much as we can and cycle things in through the season, so that there's always kind of a bald spot that we're planting inside to transfer outside. Yep. Then you get into all the hardying of inside plants before you put outside. There's challenges with insects. You mentioned moths. We've had squash bugs. The
squash vine borer is always a hidden one that people don't realize they have. If you ever experience a total collapse of your plant overnight, people start blaming the squash bugs, but you probably have the squash vine borer. So look inside their stems, because I did this to a neighbor. She had sudden collapse of their plants. Popped open the stems, and right there was the vine borers.
Yeah, we had a couple of mushy spots that were attributed to that last year. So.
And be careful not to compost those unless your compost pile gets hot enough to kill them.
Yep.
So she fed them to her chickens.
There you go.
I was like, that works too.
All right, well, we're wrapping up here. We're rounding third and heading to home plate. Is there anything else that you want to share with us or our audience that as we launch these episodes early, I guess, mid-summer, that things you'll be up and coming, or programs that might be available at that time that they could benefit from?
Yeah, like I said, first of all, always look out for us. We are planning some field days, and I am planning to also, like I said, what's been coming up a lot is, cover cropping. So I'm really hoping to offer some programs for cover cropping for the fall, which is basically, instead of leaving bare dirt on the ground, let's put something on it so that it can be green all winter long, and then build those nutrients or loosen your soil for the upcoming year. Yeah. So I'm hoping to have a lot of that, as well as, some information out on whatever pests, whether it be a disease or an insect, or updates on how to make sure we do things healthy and wise, because we can't just stop. We don't just think, okay, spring, let's get it in. Again, problems arise, and it is so much easier to deal with a problem when it comes up. So if you ever do have a problem, feel free, contact my office. Again, 219-465-3555.
Nikki, I appreciate your time today. And again, thank Nikky Witkowski, the Extension Coordinator of Ag and Natural Resources at the Purdue Extension. I appreciate your time and sharing of your knowledge.
And thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it greatly too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.